Hello, hello. Um, Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Mannat Kaur. She is currently residing in New York City, working and, just seriously saving the world, especially with COVID and, you know, all of the new different types of viruses and, different like versions of what's going on. She's just so hard at work. I'm so honored to be interviewing her today and, having a conversation. So I'm gonna have her join. Um, okay. Hello.
Hi guys. I hope the lighting's okay. I'm hiding in my room because there's some remodeling happening at
Uh,
my parents' house. And so if you hear weird noises, I'm so sorry about that, but that's what it is.
you're totally good. I saw Sirati they post about like a ghost or something.
Yeah, I haven't found it yet, but maybe that's because the house is very well occupied right now and she was alone that night. So I don't know if it will make an appearance. Maybe it's because she was here closer to like the Halloween, like November time. Maybe that lighting is better. All
Yep.
right.
Well, keep us updated about it. I'm hoping you don't come across it because that would be scary, but
Yeah, I hope not.
I'm so honored to be talking to you today. I had the live start and then I had to end it, but I was saying that, I saw your post like at the perfect time because I don't know if I told you about how I had like that test score that I didn't qualify for and I was just so down and I was just so sad. And then I saw your post and I was like, wow, perfect timing. So I think just not
Aw.
only hearing about your journey as a doctor, but hearing about your journey of you, overcoming all of the failures and, just going through all the bumps in the road, that super inspiring and super helpful for us all to hear. So I guess I want to start off by letting you give yourself like an introduction, what you do, all that.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mannat. I'm Sirat's sister, and I am right now a chief resident in a hospital in New York City. Um, Chief resident is sort of like a hybrid administrative and clinical position that is an extra year after you finish 3 years of training. And after chief residency, I will be doing a gastroenterology fellowship out in Arizona, which is close to home for me. I'm very excited about moving west. And hopefully after that, I will be joining my dad in practice as GI. So Dr. Saini Sr. and Dr. Saini Jr., which has been, as I described in my post, just my absolute lifelong dream for over 20 years. And the post that Rhea is referring to is pretty much just like me describing what that journey has been like and the multitude of failures that I've experienced on the way here, and you know the doubt and the challenges and really just the persistence. And I think that's really what I've been focusing on in terms of when people congratulate me and I'm just like, yeah man, like I just stuck with it.
that's that's amazing. I mean to hear all of that and to hear how you're able to chase after your dream, work with your dad. That's just so heartwarming. And I think speaking of that, speaking of it being your dream, I guess going straight into the questions, a common misconception that I have heard of is that, there's a lot of stereotype in the Asian community, like, oh, your parents forced you, you either have to be a lawyer, doctor, or engineer. And
Mhm.
I want to be a lawyer, I want to be an attorney. Even when I tell people that and I'm like, I want to get into Harvard, they're like, don't let your parents tell you like right off the bat. And I'm like, it's not them, it's my dream. So, just being someone from the Asian community and being someone who had this dream, did you ever face people going like, oh, you don't need to, don't push yourself too hard?
Yeah, I think it really undermines the dream where it's like people doubt your veracity or your true intention in doing what you want to do. I mean, definitely in our South Asian community, most of our parents have highly emphasized education, and these are professions that require a long road in education in order to achieve that license for the profession. So I think a lot of people just assume that we're doing that to please our parents. But like, you know, Sierra being my sister, she's not in any kind of traditional licensed field, and she's very successful, and we're all proud of her. So for me, I frequently use her as an example to be like, look, like no one's making me do what I do. Like my sister does something that's absolutely out of the ordinary for most like South Asian expectations. And for me, it's like medicine was just the best fit for what I want to achieve in life and my personality. And I knew that that was going to fulfill me. And I think just definitely can be sort of disheartening to have to deal with that doubt of your intentions. But I think the work speaks for itself, though, because when you are the best at what, or striving to be the best at what you do, those intentions become clear to people around you that this is really what you're made to do. This is what you wanted to do. And that passion comes through in your work. Without passion in your work, certainly it will be obvious to people that this is something that you were like made to do or forced to do. But for South Asians who truly have a passion for those particular fields that are stereotypical for us, I think it's just a matter of persistence and like, you know, ignoring the haters and just being like, my work will speak for itself when I get there.
I absolutely love that. I think, I mean, my mom even tells me that you don't have to prove yourself to people, just, you know, work your hardest. And even, you know, what I'm hearing from people as I'm, you know, aiming for different colleges and speaking to different people from those colleges, they just say, follow your passion and just try and like do your best and dig deep into it. And if you do good, then you do good. If you don't, then it's fine. But as long as you're putting your best foot forward and following what you're genuinely passionate about, that, you know, things are going to start working out at some point.
Absolutely. I mean, I think part of the journey itself is what should be fulfilling. You know what I mean? Like life is short, and this is a very long road to get to, whether it's law, engineering, or medicine. It's a very long road. A lot of your 20s are spent, you know, working to fulfill this dream, but it should, the journey itself is part of that fulfillment. And that may be hard to accept or even believe. Trust me. Like, I think a lot of the times I was like, this is crazy. Like, why am I pushing myself to this like limit to get where I want to be? But part of like, I know, I get that it's easy to say now that I feel like I finally achieved that last like level, but I look back at it, I'm like, I could have done this the direct way, or I did it the scenic route. And would I ever want to do it again? No way. It was so hard. But would I want to do it the direct way and like supplant the scenic route? No, the scenic route is what made me who I am, and that's why I'm going to be a better physician than somebody who maybe had everything handed to them, you know, on a platter.
I remember you saying that to me too. I think I was like just texting you about, you know, everything that happened. You're like, you know, the if it's not handed to you on a silver platter and it's not, and you have to go through that journey, that's what makes you humble. So that's definitely stuck with me, and I thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And it's just something important, especially for youth to know. You know, I mean, from teens to your 20s, it's, I feel like so much of it is just competition, comparing yourself to others, even though you're really not supposed to. And I struggle with that. I struggle with being like, oh, these people are better than me. And I even mentioned that to you. So I guess I'll let you say what you told me, because that also really stuck with me about like comparing yourself to others.
Yeah, I mean, every person's journey is completely different. And I think for me, coming from a place where I had high expectations because I was at a very prestigious boarding school for high school, and then I went to a top 25 university in California for undergrad, there was a huge expectation that that kind of would continue into my medical journey, but that's not what happened at all. And I ended up in a Caribbean medical school, which, you know, had I not gone there, I think I would understand why people just think like, oh, like, you know, that's the backdoor route, like that's like a community college type of route, or like kind of put you down for that. And a lot of Caribbean graduates for medical school have a chip on their shoulder because of that, because we constantly have to prove ourselves compared to our peers. But having now gone through that journey as a Caribbean graduate, and I think it's similar across any fields, the people who had to work harder, thanks, Trevor, the people who had to work harder to be where we are, I mean, we really are much more like, we're really more empathetic in all aspects of for our patients, for our coworkers, for mid-level providers in medicine. I mean, all of us have our own different journey. There's no point in comparing. Some of us took the scenic route, some of us took the direct route. We all end up with at the same, like, we all have the same license at the end of the day. But I think that it's humbled me to a point where I will never, ever doubt the value of hard work to get to where you need to be. Yeah, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it. I would never do it again. It was really hard, but I wouldn't change it because I think that's part and parcel of the fabric of who I am as a physician, is the fact that I had to go through all of these difficult things. And I have a lot of respect also for other foreign medical graduates who come from other countries like India and Egypt and Poland and like all over the world, who come to America because this is their dream and what they have to face to get to where they are. I would definitely trust one of those physicians any day over like a brand name doctor. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that completely makes sense. I don't know what happened to my face. Oh my gosh, this is weird. Anyway, um, yeah, I mean, speaking of that, and it goes a little bit back to you're talking about us talking about people thinking that you're forced into this. Did you have people like expecting for you as a South Asian, like, oh, you're not meeting our standards, or you're not smart enough, or you're not doing enough of this or that?
I mean, it was really tough as an undergrad because the pre-medical kind of group, a lot of them are obviously South Asian, and I did not do well in those classes. And so it was kind of like a little bit alienating, you could say, in a sense where it's like, well, everybody else is here with the same expectations and the same, like, similar background, but they're not struggling like I'm struggling. So it's kind of hard to find like a camaraderie sometimes with that group of people, because like I had colleagues in my pre-med classes that all went to, like, brand name med schools and are all very successful. I don't want to diminish their success, but I think the difference is just that they might not have had like the empathy or like an expanded horizon enough to kind of understand the way a journey could go if you weren't like super successful in those pre-medical years. And I'm sure pre-law is the same way. A lot of those classes are gatekeeping classes that are meant to weed out and put a curve and to kind of discourage people from pursuing those fields. Like, I've never used organic chemistry a day in my life for medicine, but it's a big requirement, and it's a big monster that we all have to conquer in the beginning. Just because you lose that first few battles does not mean you've lost the war. And I think, yeah, I think a lot of people in the South Asian community, like, they have definitely the work ethic and they have the habits to create that success early on. And some of us are late bloomers, but we can still win the war. We can still make it at the end. And I appreciate the community that I found in the Caribbean Medical School community, because there's lots of South Asians there too. And they are the people who chose to pursue this dream because of themselves. And they're the ones who survived and were successful in the Caribbean Medical Schools. Certainly there were kids there in Caribbean Medical Schools who were there because their parents made them, but they didn't last the whole 4 years. Like, it's obvious that it takes a passion to continue to drive yourself through this journey. Your mom or dad wanting it for you, it's not going to cut it.
I mean, I absolutely love that. Just because you lost a few battles doesn't mean you lost the war, and also kind of goes in with slow and steady wins the race, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, it all does make you humble. It all does teach you lessons, and I think learning them now, I'm pretty young to speak on this, but for you as someone who's like gone through that whole journey of school, I think it teaches you the lessons now rather than later in life, which is wonderful. And I'm sure, do you have like a lot of patience now?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think delayed gratification is the name of the game when you choose one of these like long haul like professions. But at the same time, I still try to like remember to feel fulfilled every day, like, because I think an important part about it is that pre-med was not very fulfilling because a lot of the stuff that we were learning had nothing to do with what I was going to end up practicing later. But when you get into med school or law school or whatever, you're actually finally starting to learn the stuff that you will apply in your daily life. And all of that is important. Like you learning the habits that you have now might be the thing that helps you, you know, win your case in the future. Me learning the things that I was learning in med school might actually applied when I see patients for the rest of my life. And so that's really when the journey started to become more fulfilling and meaningful, because when you finally get through that first gate, like through the pre whatever gate, um, even though it's a difficult journey, it becomes so much more fulfilling because that stuff is finally relevant for where you're going to end up eventually. And so that is also a big motivation, I think, to be the best you can in med school, in law school, in engineering school, whatever graduate you know, field you choose to pursue, because finally you feel like you're learning stuff that you are interested in, that you care about, and that you know is actually going to apply to you being the best you can be in your profession in the future.
Incredible. Thank you so much. And I think that really will resonate with a lot of us, and not being the best in the school, being your best self, which is, you know, I mean, it's good to have a goal to be the best, but I mean, honestly, a lot of the time it can lead to self-comparison, which isn't very healthy. And as you said, we're all in our own journey. We're all like, I don't know. I just whatever you said was good. I don't want to mess it up, but like we are we are in our own journey. So just focus on your bettering yourself, and you know, putting your best foot forward. Um, but we actually have a lot of questions, so I don't know if I'll be able to get to all of them in time. Um, but yeah, if anyone's watching and has questions, please put them in the question box, and I'll try to see if I can ask. But before that, do you mind like telling us a little bit about like just your journey in general? When did your passion start for um, becoming a doctor? Did you ever explore different avenues or different professions? And you know, how someone asked, as a fellow person in California, how did you end up in New York?
Oh man, I do miss being in California. I've been in New York for 5.5 years now, and by the time I finish, it'll be 6 years. But yeah, so my dad is a gastroenterologist. He had a very unique and special and difficult journey as well, coming from a relatively impoverished family in India before being a very successful gastroenterologist here in the US. But for me, my journey was like, you know, when I was young, he was something I always looked up to. And he was very encouraging, but again, there wasn't like a pressure that I have to do what he does. Like they just wanted me to be successful and well educated. But I think since I was 8 years old, we used to follow dad around on his rounds and see, I mean, in a safe manner, of course, but like, you know, see the hospital and like tag along and be in the office a lot, because that was like basically our after school care, was to sit in the office till it was time to come home. And I don't know, I just think that I just thought that, you know, my dad is my hero and I want to do what he does. And that was like the beginning of that seed. But then as I grew older and understood more about what it means to be a physician or what it takes to be a doctor, um, I became both more interested and also more wary and discouraged in a way, because it became obvious that this is not something that you can just sign up for. Like it's a really hard wait, like long journey, and it's also a really hard job. Like it's not like the kicking back and chilling. Like every single day you have to bring your A game. So I, you know, started working really hard in high school, obviously, to like get a good university, because when you get the good university, you can get into a good medical school, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not exactly what ended up happening for me. I struggled a lot at my undergrad with my pre-med courses. I was on the borderline of failing multiple of those pre-med gateway classes. But ultimately, I made the decision that even though I did not get into any domestic medical schools, to still pursue my dream by going the kind of scenic route, which was going Caribbean. It's also important to note that I really feel like I didn't have a whole bunch of mentorship until, honestly, all the way up until residency. Maybe right about then I started to feel like I had better mentors. And it's really just a matter of like, my dad's journey was super different than mine, and he did not, like, going through med school and training and stuff from India is very different, and plus that was like 30 years ago, right? So I didn't really have too many people that were like close to me in age in terms of their journey and like only a few steps ahead of me to tell me, oh, don't do it this way, do it this way, or like ignore what those advisors are telling you. They're just doing their 9 to 5 job and like following a script. And like no one is giving you your personalized advice to your journey. And I think a close mentorship would have been really helpful for me in the pre-med years. But unfortunately, I didn't have that guidance. So I ended up, applying to only like top 50 medical schools that were all brand names. Like I really didn't even look into alternate routes in the US. And all I had heard of was, okay, well, if you don't get into a US school, you just go Caribbean. So I did that, and that's fine. I'm very fortunate that I ended up surviving the island, because that in itself, they have a very high attrition rate there. They also try to fail you in Caribbean schools because they don't want their graduates to fail certain exams that are used as a standard for success. So they'd rather fail you before you even get to the exam. So yeah, I mean, they like, oh, 95% like step one exam pass rate, first time takers. I'm like, yeah, but you failed like 20% of the class before you even graduated those people who were allowed to take the step one exam. So it's very misleading. So when you get there, you're like, oh shit, like there's still a lot of hard work to do here. Survived the island, and was very grateful to get one of my top choice residencies in New York City. So that's how I ended up in New York. Was I chose to train there because that's where my dad trained, in New York City. And what's up, Ankit? And I wanted to have a similar experience in terms of what made him an excellent doctor, and he really attributes that to the difficult and trying like training that you get in New York. It's definitely infamous for being a place where you're going to see everything under the sun. You're going to be expected to work like, like a dog, but you come out being like a well-oiled machine. And I knew what I was getting into going into New York and asking for that. But I think it paid off, because ultimately being a well-trained internal medicine physician made me a better candidate for gastroenterology. And I think that really showed through my application. Like I may not have had the longest, most complicated resume that some other applicants might have. But I think in things like letters of recommendation or reputation for where I had trained, it was very obvious that I'm going to be a very competent, capable physician. And I would not have any issue, bringing my A game to gastroenterology, which is a very competitive field. So that's sort of the journey. Like there was a lot of doubts. There was a lot of like, I was lost sometimes. I was confused sometimes. I failed a lot. I found help along the way, but maybe not as early as I would have needed it or wanted it. But I ended up where I needed to be. And so that's why I call it the scenic route, because it was not the most direct way to get to where I need to be by any means. But I think it was the most enriching way to get to where I need to be.
That's such a beautiful, and it just makes you feel so empowered to hear it, especially as, a high schooler who's in all of these competitions. And then when you, like, there's some times that I felt like, oh, I'm for sure, like, not to be overconfident, but just to be like, okay, I'm going to manifest that I got this. And you genuinely believe that you did good, and then you don't get the results you want. So, hearing your story is definitely empowering and gives hope. So, thank you for sharing. I mean, I'm definitely very touched.
Thanks. Yeah, disappointment was a very familiar feeling for me, for sure. Disappointment happened a lot, and sometimes you have to remember not to autopilot yourself into disappointment, because that will start to kind of chip away at your resolve and your dream. And don't you have to persist. That is the most important thing, is disappointment will be part of any journey that's worth taking.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to persist. And that's what the difference is between me and maybe somebody who like didn't survive the island, or maybe didn't match or whatever, like, and then like maybe they chose to end their journey there. But for me, I saw the failures that I had to endure, but I persisted.
That's incredible. I mean, I think just, you can tell that you're a very hardworking person. I've seen your interviews, and especially with, how hard you worked when COVID cases were so high, and, the math, it was just, it's heartbreaking to see, but I don't think we would have a world like this if there weren't people like you here. So I thank you for that from the bottom of my heart, because I can't imagine how hard you must work, and you're putting your life and your safety on the line every day. But I mean, to be able to go with your A game every single day, it's just so incredible. And to know that there's humans out there who've like they got here because they put in all of that hard work and they put in that drive and they, had that motivation. That's incredible. Um, Someone asked if I'm going to be posting this video on my page, and I will, because Dr. Mannat has a legacy that we need to keep. I think everyone needs to hear your story. But there are a ton of questions in the question answer bar, so I'm going to ask a few of them if that's okay. This is kind of very, very, close to what you were just saying, but someone asked, how do you cultivate self-belief, especially in the face of setbacks and failures and even like poor self-esteem or imposter syndrome?
Oh, imposter syndrome is so real in most professions, especially how long it takes for us to get there. Because when we're in it, we see people ahead of us who know so much, and you're just like, how am I ever going to get there? And I think it goes back to just like persistence. I'm not going to lie. Like, I think I had a lot of doubt, and I still have doubts. Like, now that I finally got it, I'm like, oh my God, I have to be an expert in gastroenterology. Like, I have to be the source, and I have to know everything about that particular system. And it's complicated stuff, and it's scary to have to be like the person who knows everything about that particular subject. Like, you are a licensed professional and expert in that subject. But I would say, again, like three things, right? Persistence, like I mentioned before. Mentorship. So I guarantee you, any mentor that you ever choose to have in your life will tell you about their failures too. Like, there's not anybody in the field that you are in that's going to say, I like cruised through this. That doesn't happen. And then the last thing I said, persistence, mentorship, and a support network. I think I mentioned in my post about like the people who floated my boat when I didn't believe. Like, the same people in the beginning may not be the same people that I have right now, but a large portion of them are the same people who were there with me for the whole journey. And having that support network is a big, important aspect of both your mental health and just like the gas to put in your engine to keep going. As long as you keep that engine going and you have the support to put the gas in there, you'll get there. That's what the persistence is for. As long as you have mentorship, you're not going to get lost on your map. So if you think about it that way, like, you are an engine, but you need gas, you need directions, you need the support. So if you're able to keep that engine going, you have people to gas you up, you have mentorship to keep you in the right direction. Your job as the engine is to persist, to just keep going. So it really takes a group effort, a village, to really raise each and every person in whatever particularly difficult field you choose to do. But it comes in the form of like coworkers, mentors, family, other people who like work at your hospital, like so many like nurses or med students or everybody who just like tells you every day that I believe in you. And so sometimes it's hard to hear yourself say, I believe in me. But it's so, so, so important to have that myriad of people across all aspects of your life journey to be like, no, I believe in you too. And you got to use that to gas yourself up sometimes. It's hard to just bring that from yourself every single day. That it's hard for anyone in every field, probably for the rest of your life. And so having that meaningful support network on top of persistence and mentorship is what I would say is what helped me continue to believe in that dream.
I think also along those lines, like, I do have friends who have goals that, are in the doctor or medical field. Um, but even outside of that, like as an influencer, something not as traditional in the South Asian community, and like they just struggle with feeling like they don't have support, especially from family. Sometimes family is not supportive. But you did mention that you do have um, family support, which is amazing. I mean, I think everyone deserves to, have people who are there, who live with you, who want to see you grow, who want to see you follow your passions. But do you have advice for anyone who doesn't have, I guess, that in terms of family?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there are people in my journey who did not have, like, people in a similar journey with me who did not have necessarily like the best family support. Um, I mean, it sort of just becomes your chosen family then. You know what I mean? Like, you will still find people who believe in your dream, but they may be a chosen family instead of a blood family. But that to me is still family. For me, living so far away from home for the past 8 years now, because I had 2 years on the island and almost 6 years in New York. So mom and dad, provide as best support as they can, emotionally, financially, whatever they can do. But for the past 8 years, like, I've really been living on my own, and that's where my chosen family really becomes important. That was a huge aspect of how people, like residents like me, were able to survive the spring 2020 surge in New York City. A lot of those resident physicians who were physicians in training, hired at hospitals. New York City has hospitals that pretty much run on resident physicians. Most hospitals in New York are like that. And so you're talking about young physicians who are far, far away from home, some of them from different countries, and who have the burden of the world on their shoulders to survive this pandemic and carry these patients through. And like the whole city of 8 million people is like dead and quiet and just watching you try and survive. That was a place where my chosen family were the people who were next to me and helped me get through that. I mean, my parents wished for the world that they could be there for me, but they couldn't because it was potentially life threatening and I didn't want them to come. But what got me through are my chosen family, my coworkers, my co-residents at my hospital, and I will forever be thankful for that. And those people are just as important as your blood family.
That's really beautiful, and I think just the concept of chosen family. Um, I mean, I haven't heard anyone say it like put it that way. And that also comes into you have to be careful of who you surround yourself by, because there are unfortunately some people who will like be there for you at the beginning of the journey, but then kind of ditch you along the way. And I think you mentioned that. So I think just also being careful of who you're choosing to befriend, but um, support doesn't necessarily always have to mean family. It could be what you said, people who are with you along the way, who are in the journey with you. So I just think hearing, your version of it was very beautiful. Um, wow. These questions are like very, very all over the place, but I'm going to try and ask them in a decent order. Um, I think you already mentioned this, but did you ever consider like changing majors or switching career paths? And if so, where would you be now?
Uh, well, in first grade, I wanted to be an astronaut, so I guess I would be on the moon. But that was a very, very young dream when we were just learning about, this like space and stuff. When you're learning which planets, in first grade. But honestly, there were a lot of haters and a lot of doubters for my dream as physician. No shade to mid-level providers whatsoever, but a lot of people were like, oh, why don't you just become a physician assistant or a nurse practitioner? Like, it's better for your lifestyle. Like, you're a woman, like you should be more family focused and family oriented. Like, being a doctor is not conducive. Like, you should not put that first or whatever. And that never came from my parents. That came from other people. And that was very disheartening. But I think for me, like, I always knew that I wanted to be a physician because there's certain like responsibilities and duties that a physician does that I felt well suited towards. So I don't really think I seriously considered any other path. Like, I just knew that this is what I have to do because that's how I will feel fulfilled in this life and how I think I can best serve the people around me is reaching my potential. If you don't reach your potential, you will not actually be able to best serve the people around you. You will not be fulfilled. And so for me, that was being a physician. I don't think there was still a lot of doubt in terms of will I be able to reach that lofty goal, but I don't think I had any doubt in terms of is this what I want to do?
And I think that's beautiful because that shows the true passion that you have um, from the beginning. I mean, to be honest, there was a point I thought about being an astronaut because it sounds super cool. But yeah, that's not my dream anymore. But shout out and kudos to all of the actual astronauts because that is pretty
Sure.
cool. All right. Someone asked, what are the three most important qualities that one should have if they're going to pursue medicine?
Ooh, so one thing I want to mention is that we all get the same license at the end of the day to practice medicine. But the biggest difference between Dr. A and Dr. B and Dr. C is the way they approach things, their personality, the way that they analyze things. Like that is a not controllable factor, right? Like you can control for the factor of we all pass the same exams, we all go through the same amount of training, whatever, when you're a physician. But the difference between doctors A, B, and C is going to be their personality. And so that's a difficult thing to control for, but I would say, so reliability is really important. I mean, I think patients are able to trust you if you are reliable. Communication is absolutely key. This job, it has a lot more humanistic aspect to it than some people might expect. I know you have to study so much and lock yourself in a library to really get those scores that you need to get in order to pass certain things. But if you're not able to communicate with your patient very well, you're not going to be able to provide them the best care. And communication is a two-way street where you have to be able to hear what your patient is saying too. So reliability, communication, and probably like nerves of steel. You do really have to be able to work well under pressure. And what that means is you have to be an organized person. You have to be, thorough with your work. You have to be confident in your ability. So that is like, you can't just decide I'm going to be super brave and have nerves of steel. The way you get there is to trust yourself in that process. And I can trust myself if I know that I've been thorough, if I know that I'm well read in this subject, if I know that I have the resources and capability to make the best outcome for that patient. So in times of emergency and stuff, having those nerves of steel comes from a place of self-confidence. So I would say those are the most important aspects of it. I think that's probably applicable to a lot of professions though, like being able to be reliable, being able to communicate, being able to work well under pressure serves you in a lot of high functioning careers. But in medicine, the stakes are ever so high because you're talking about a person's life in your hands. So the nerves of steel is definitely a big dose of that is necessary.
I think that's, again, very beautiful. And again, like you just gave a real life example of trusting the process. We hear that all the time, and it's just hard to be like, oh, how do I apply that? And I guess, thing is just having confidence in yourself and knowing that if you've put in the work that you're able to and you're capable of doing it.
100%.
All right. Another question is, what do you think the biggest problems will be for the next generation of doctors?
Oh, well, I think there's a lot to be said about how the healthcare system has responded to pandemic in general, and it's really kind of uncovered the ugly underbelly for a lot of people, those in and outside of medicine. The failure of like public health initiatives or the failure of the public to do what needs to be done as a collective group and act in a inherently unselfish manner in order to create an outcome. We didn't see that happen. I mean, that did not, like, that is, there will be books and books and books and courses and like just historical accounts of what has happened in the past 2 years and God knows how much longer. And a lot of that analysis will actually be in a public health manner. I also have a master's in global health, which is similar to a public health degree. And there's really just a lot to be said about, hey, Saji, nice to see you. A lot to be said about the systems management and how important that is for physicians to do the best that they can in their job. So what I'm getting at is that I think a lot of our journey is very individualistic and focuses a lot on how I can be my best to get into medicine. But the reality of medicine is it's a huge group effort. It's a complicated network across the country and interacts between all aspects of the medical team: physician, nurse practitioner, PA, pharmacist, hospital administration. Like all of those things is a very tightly interwoven network of how things operate in the United States. And there was a large breakdown on multiple levels of trust and also due processes that led us to where we are today in terms of basically the United States failure to respond, like just utter failure to respond to the pandemic. So a big part of where medicine will be going in the future, in my opinion, is going to be like a deep analysis and a retrospective sort of look into how can we never have this happen again. I mean, as you guys know, like 800,000 people so far are dead just in the United States, over 2 million people in the whole world from this virus. And it's a preventable condition now with a vaccine that is not being distributed well across the world and is not being accepted by people who are being misled by like false information and propaganda from people who have alternate motives. So as a physician, it's been very, very frustrating to see that, because on an individual level, there's not much you can do. But hopefully in the future, there will be more to be said about how physicians and all aspects of the healthcare team can work in a beneficial way to prevent this from happening again. I think the future of medicine has always been in public health. It will continue to be in public health. History has shown that medicine advanced through public health initiatives. And so I think the issue is that a lot of people discount that because they're so focused on their individual journey of getting into medicine. But the reality of being a physician is that you actually are always working in a team. And that also includes the public health network across the country. So I'm interested to see where that will go. I mean, as most people know, like to get anything done, it's actually in politics. So we'll see if there will be any policy changes that will hopefully affect and change how we practice day to day. And you guys can see how that's playing out in the public arena with just like vaccine mandates or the protests that people have against it. It really shouldn't be that complicated of a topic, but people tend to think it is.
I mean, thank you for, saying all of that. And I think it's super interesting to see how much medicine and politics really go hand in hand in terms of their correlation, especially now, especially with COVID, especially with like getting vaccines, getting booster shots. And I've seen you post about, I think, getting the booster shot, and getting vaccines. So I mean, it wasn't something I really thought I would do when I was younger, just to see that correlation between politics and medicine. But I will say, for any of the high schoolers or college students watching this, there are a few organizations, some of which that I'm involved in, and we're writing policy for public health. So hopefully, within the next few years, there is going to be a change. But honestly, it's really heartbreaking to see the fact that there's so much fight in, medicine, because it's about saving people's lives. So
yeah, it really shouldn't be that political. It should be fairly easy to decide that, oh, this is a bad thing, we should prevent that. But instead it becomes really mired in misleading language where unfortunately people who may not be as educated or people who may not have access to the correct information are being just led to slaughter. Like literally those 800,000 people, majority of them, at least since the vaccine has been widely available, they were just misled. That's how I look at it. And it makes me sad because they will continue to hold on to those confusing beliefs up until they're intubated in the ICU. And it's a failure on the part of the U.S. public health system.
Let this also be a PSA that don't just get your information from the news, because I think that's where it gets really, really political. Oh, yeah. Wow, I really love that.
Yeah, politics is nothing but medicine on a large scale. I mean, it's difficult because people who are making public health decisions, who have the power, who wield the power to do that, they themselves are like, physicians don't have time. Like, I don't have time to go into like Congress and give a statement on this type of stuff. Like, I'm too busy doing my job. And that has always been a big handicap of medicine, is that we are the ones who are qualified to provide that opinion, but we do not have any time to do so. And politics is a very slow moving and complicated machine that, does not necessarily seek the proper expert advice from the people who could be giving it. I think it's obvious on multiple ways, not just the COVID vaccine, but just like women's health, or even like paid maternity leave. All of these things are medical issues at the end of the day, actually, but not enough attention is being paid to the experts, and those experts also don't have enough time to do so because they're still doing their job.
Do you think that your job and just in general, doctors and nurses, the job would be a little bit easier if there was not as much tension and, arguments and fights about medicine and politics?
So there's a big conversation about burnout happening, not just in medicine, but like I think as a collective whole in the American like work hard economy. But medicine has had a very long conversation about burnout because we have been operating at this level of expectation and output, like economic output per doctor for a very, very long time, and it's not sustainable. But part of burnout is what they've discovered, at least for physicians, is this idea of moral injury. So moral injury is essentially an injury that we suffer every day at work that chips away at our resolve and our self-fulfilling drive to be the best that we can be. And that's how you'd end up burning out because you're just tired of raging against the machine. So for us, a very large source of moral injury these days is a patient saying to my face, I don't want to get vaccinated. That injures me morally every day when that happens. Or to see like last year there were protests, I remember in Colorado, where people were like running over nurses with their cars in these protests to be like, I don't want to get vaccinated, vaccine mandates. Like these are all moral injuries. It may not mean something is happening to me physically or something is happening to the way I do my job, but the will to continue gets eroded every day when I see people refusing the vaccine. And it's a difficult thing to swallow because most people have been vaccinated in this country for one thing or the other. But instead, this particular COVID vaccine has become completely politicized, way out of context. And a lot of us feel like we're just screaming into the void about trying to educate people. It's almost like speaking to toddlers because the more you try and tell them no, the more they want to do the thing they're not supposed to do. And there's no logic to it. And you tend, yeah, burnout happens, and it's not just from the long hours. It's not just from how much student debt there is in medicine or whatever. It's about this moral injury that, like, despite all of our best efforts, despite how hard we work, despite how much in the red we've put ourselves into to do what we're doing, despite the constant litigation that physicians might fear for malpractice or whatever, all of that, like, added with the moral injury on top of that, it's just like, why am I even doing this anymore? And so moral injury is a big part of burnout right now in the medical field. And that's a lot of the reason why people see this like nursing shortage. There's actually not a shortage of nurses. There's plenty of qualified and licensed nurses in this country, but nobody is paying them enough. And they really field a majority of the verbal and sometimes physical abuse and assault of patients who are morally injurious to them and to the doctors. I'm not saying every patient should be like immensely grateful but like there should be some level of like logic and just like basic humanity in the way that you treat us. And it has not become more apparent than what's going on in this pandemic. The moral injury of both on an individual level with like angry patients or whatever, and on a community level of the United States, and the way people have treated this discourse about whether or not to get vaccinated. Like for us, it's very confusing. It's not a choice. It is a public health initiative. The way polio was, the way smallpox was, the way we have treated measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis B, tetanus, all of these diseases require vaccines. COVID is not any different, but somehow it's become this whole thing, and that's difficult for us to swallow.
Yeah, it's really just heartbreaking, especially being this generation and seeing like why now, like why are things being so politicized. And I personally feel like a lot of the time politics just becomes into a game of saying, oh, we have this point or that point, and they're so out of logic. But it's really comes down to the safety of the people and people's lives. So it's heartbreaking to see how much like division there is, and for very very unlogical reasons. It's just like a game of who's correct and who's wrong. But I, my heart goes out to you and everyone who has to go through that. And you obviously have the strength that it goes back to you saying like nerves of steel. Um, so, I mean, thank you so much for everything you do. Because having that kind of strength, and because as someone who's very sensitive, um, I can't imagine going through that every day, but you still push through. So you just have a story that's definitely inspiring a lot. Um, okay, I'm gonna try and fit in two more questions if that's all right.
Yeah.
One of them, um, based on where you're at in life right now, would you say that happiness is material or circumstantial, environmental, or a perspective?
Oh, it's definitely a perspective, 100%. I think working in medicine, like you really see some of the darkest parts of humanity. We're talking about like, addictions, abuse, diseases that end the lives of young people, or diseases that were preventable, but due to lack of access or to lack of finances, like ended up taking like, there's a lot to, like, there's a lot of impact to absorb as a person. Um, and it's a tough balance to not become like apathetic or to lose empathy, but and it's like still be able to do your job. So I would say I think most of my colleagues would agree with me, especially after like March and April of 2020, that it's really perspective, and the root of that perspective is gratitude. It is always gratitude. No matter what field you're in, no matter what stage of life you're in, no matter what challenges you're facing in this world, a there's a recent article on Vox.com, which is like a really great, informative news website that pretty much describes that a good life is actually a life that has suffering in it. You would not be able to appreciate the peaks without valleys in life. And for me, like, especially, like my parents told me, like, I'm so different after seeing what I saw in those 2, 3 months of 2020 and thereafter, but especially those first 2, 3 months. And I think when you're faced with that kind of life or death situation for so long, you have to root yourself and ground yourself and like hold on desperately to that gratitude to be able to find happiness again. Um, because it's really scary to see that kind of stuff and then go outside and like people are just like living their life like normal, like nobody has any idea. So in order to really stay connected to that, and to continue to find happiness in what I do and happiness in my life in general, I think gratitude is a really big part of that. And that is the perspective. Like you have to root your perspective in gratitude.
I agree. I mean, obviously have not gone through that, but just being grateful for where you're at in general does really help. And um, again, trusting the process and always thinking back to what am I in it for, right? And obviously, it's you are saving lives, but um, I think just going back to that. All right. Oh, can you see that? Can you see the question I just pulled up?
I don't think I can. No.
Oh, okay. I'll just read it out. Um, so someone did say that I'm a freshman in college with a disability, and I'm unsure if medicine is the right path for me because I also want to prioritize my mental health to an extent, and I know that the pre-med field is very demanding. So, what are your thoughts, and what would you do if you were in my position?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Medicine is a bit behind in terms of acceptance and space for candidates who are not fully able, is what I would say. And that is a disservice, I think, because medicine would like highly benefit from perspectives like that, and patients would highly benefit from perspectives like that. So the journey would be more difficult, and you will definitely come up against more resistance in your path. I would say the most important thing for that is, again, the mentorship and the support and the persistence. But here, mentorship would really be somebody who perhaps has had the same journey. It has been done and it can be done. But in order to make sure that more and more people fulfill their dream in medicine, despite those like shortcomings, or you'd need to find someone who's done it before you. And I think social media is a great way to reach out to somebody who's done it before you. And it's a great place to sort of seek both support and also direction and guidance into how to deal with things if you're seeking this particular path. So I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, and it also depends on exactly what particular like condition or like different ability that this person might have. But I would recommend like seeking mentorship from someone who has a similar journey that you might have, and really lean on that person for guidance and the ability to persist would be important. Again, I think it's so important to have people in those different fields, because it enriches your practice of medicine when you have those perspectives. So it's a disservice that medicine is more traditional in a way where it's more difficult for people like that to get through it. But with time and with persistent people, that will change.
We will get there one day for sure, but I do think that, you know, hearing your words about the need for different perspectives is very, very powerful, very impacting, because rarely do people ever think that maybe people could bring in different perspectives and they have the first-hand knowledge and experiences. So, you know, that would obviously help, but not only in medicine, even in different aspects, different professions, people are not, you know, they are thought of different people. They're thought of others if they aren't what society deems to be like normal or perfect. So I also have the hope that one day that will change, and I'm looking forward to that day. But, you know, thank you for being one of the people that paves way for that, because without you and without so many other doctors and nurses, we wouldn't have like even probably thought of going towards that change. So um, I guess my last question will be, is there like your own saying or a quote that you always go by? Like, what is your why?
What is my why? I guess I don't know if I have like a mantra exactly, but I would say there's a lot in like Sikhi in my religion that kind of encourages me to continue despite the challenges. It's sort of just, I'm grateful for the perspective that my faith gives me in terms of keeping an open mind to people of all faiths and all walks, and like I said before, like we need more people like that in medicine, and it would be a disservice to medicine to lose people who maintain that that kind of perspective. And so I guess at the end of the day, I do it for the patients. Like I really, that's who I do it for. And I draw my strength from my family, from my friends, from my faith. And it is replenished and it is encouraged by the positive feedback I get from patients and the positive impact I can have on their lives and on their treatment. You know, frequently, so I speak Spanish. I learned how to speak Spanish, and that's been a really big part of how my patients choose to come back to me, because they feel heard and they feel understood. And that has been a really like encouraging aspect for me, because they need that. And to me, it's important to continue to provide that. And to be a woman of color, and to be just a woman in general, like in medicine, it's really, really important to remain and be that representation and be that listening person for patients. And so I think a lot of doctors would say the same thing, that we really do this for them. Like there's a lot of stuff that we go through to get here. but even just one positive patient encounter in a day, helps you wake up the next day. So I think at the end of the day, that's where the strength to continue comes from, is to serve and to serve at the best of our ability.
That's really beautiful. And I love how you tied it into the Sikh religion. Just, with you embody Seva, you embody Charlie Kala, and it's just so empowering to know that there are people like that. And I honestly have not heard many Sikh voices in medicine. So, and as a woman of color again, and just being a woman in general, you have worked so hard, worked so hard to get here. And I'm just so honored that I was able to talk to you and hear
Oh,
your story, have your story. I think you need to be like, everyone needs to hear your story, because just not only as like your journey to becoming a doctor, but the failure, because that's something that people don't really want to talk about. People don't really want to be vulnerable, and people don't really want to say, "Oh, I failed at this." They're just like, "Oh, like they just I don't know why." I know it's hard to be vulnerable, but it gives people hope, and it gives people um the strength to know, "Hey, I'm not alone in my failures. There are other people who have had bumps in the road, but they ended up succeeding." Um so I thank you so much for that, and I really hope that as many people as possible can hear your voice, because it's just, we're so blessed to have people like you in our world.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the platform, and thank you so much for asking amazing, insightful questions. And yeah, I hope it's helpful. And I encourage anybody who's interested to reach out to me and talk about their failures, because we have to normalize it for sure.
All right. Well, if you guys have any more questions, I guess feel free to reach out to Dr. Mannat, and I can also, if you comment on this, I'm gonna post it. Then I'll have her answer. But thank you again. I appreciate you so much, and I hope to do one of these in the future.
For sure. Awesome. Well, have a good day. I hope you get to recharge and enjoy some of the holidays. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
You too, and thank you for spending your day off
Yeah,
doing
of
this.
course.
It really means a lot.
It was really fun.
Have a good day.
Bye.